Hello? Would be quite ironic. The one Windows guy in a Mac conference, he couldn't get his notebook to work. So. All right. My name is Simon Stewart, and I'm going to be talking about pet projects, which is something a lot of us maybe do, but I think a lot of us maybe don't do in a mindful sense and kind of know the benefit of what we're actually doing. And then, of course, there are a lot of people that don't do it. So this is a talk that I do a fair amount for the Microsoft developers, who tend to benefit a lot more. Because the way I see it is it's kind of a 99% and a 1% thing. And for the most part, you guys are the 1%. You guys are kind of the top end of the pyramid, I mean, let's be honest. And it's a lot of the other developers kind of make up the bulk. I mean, I think that's a fair statement. I don't think the Ruby guys are going to argue about that. Yeah, there we go. So this is not about saying that pet projects are the only way to do it. And if you don't do a pet project, you're a Microsoft developer. You're back in the 99%. That's not the case. This is just one of the ways of doing it. So let's kind of run through a couple of things. There's one guarantee that we've all got, and that is that there's always going to be another JavaScript library next week. And also that we're never going to know everything, which I think is fantastic. We work in an industry where things change so much, and practices change because of the industry and because of technology and all that kind of thing. And that's, for me, that's kind of one of the cool things, that you're going to wake up tomorrow morning and there's going to be something new that you have to learn, which I think is great. Obviously, there's going to be new stuff that comes out that you really shouldn't be learning, and you should be kind of ignoring that section of Hacker News. But there's also good stuff that you kind of have to keep up to date with. So it's one of those industries where you've really got to be reading the whole time and playing with things the whole time. And that, to me, is where pet projects come in. It's not so much just kind of firing up an IDE and quickly hacking with something just to kind of get a taste for it. That's one part of it. To me, a pet project is when you take things a bit further. It's not quite to the extent that Garen spoke about yesterday, where you've actually got a product in mind necessarily, but it's doing something for the sake of doing something and kind of getting it out there and getting people to look at it. So what is a pet project? Well, to me, it's about doing something for the sake of doing something. It's not doing something because you have to, or because you're necessarily employed to, or because you're paid to. You do it because it's a demonstration of passion. And that, to me, is what this whole talk is about, and what pet projects are all about. It's about being able to make something and being able to point to it and say, well, I did that. And typically, you're going to do it end to end, as opposed to working in a big team where you've got a whole bunch of different people involved. With a pet project, typically you're going to run the whole thing, and it's a fantastic way of proving, to yourself and to potential future employees and employers and partners and that kind of thing, that you can actually do the whole stack. And it's a great thing to do, in my opinion. It's not always something that we can always do in our work environment. We don't always all work for startups as much as we always want to. It's just how things are. We don't always get to do that, at least not through our whole career. So 3M has popularized this idea of 15% time, and Google's got the 20% time, sort of 50 years apart, which must be an inflation thing. So it's kind of similar to pet projects in a way. To me, pet projects are maybe an external thing. You could do that 15% time with pet projects that are now part of a company and within the kind of constraints of an 8 to 5 thing. It becomes a little bit more tricky to manage. I've got a slide on that a bit later. So whatever works for you and whatever works for your company. Obviously, this is, you've got to play in the constraints of the company you work in. You can't just kind of take off a Friday and say, well, I'm going to hack on stuff, because that normally means you don't come to work on Monday. So you've got to just bear that in mind. And it's all about finding that intersect, the intersect of what you enjoy doing and what you're good at doing, and preferably what you're going to get paid to do. That's the ideal. With pet projects, you can kind of remove the idea of getting paid for it because you're doing it because you're good at it and because you love doing it, which I think is the way that you can demonstrate passion. You're not going to do it just because you got paid. You're going to do it just for the sake of kind of that sort of warm and fuzzy feeling. So the call to action, and I'm putting this right in the beginning, just in case you guys kind of switch off. It's all about going out there and actually making something. And Kevin Rose had a pretty cool tweet the other day. I don't really know what the context was that he made it in, but thanks to Photoshop, I can make it look like whatever I want. So today is the day. Have an idea, go build it. And that to me is something really cool. Talking of Photoshop and MS Paint, you guys have seen the new Microsoft logo. So I think they kind of dog-fooded. I think they kind of used MS Paint to kind of do it. But you can imagine how many millions they actually spent on that. So Renee mentioned that Google image searches kind of produce weird results. This wasn't actually part of research for this talk. I was looking for something else I'm not going to talk about. But the nice thing about it to me is it kind of demonstrates everything that our industry is not. We have the skills and we can actually make something for a living, which I think is really fantastic. And it's very difficult to speak to people who aren't in the industry because you actually have to speak to them as opposed to here you can kind of just Skype and it kind of classes as speaking. These guys don't get to make something. That's kind of what they do. Can you imagine kind of around a dinner table talking about, what do you do? How was your day kind of thing? We get to make something, which I think is phenomenal. It might not necessarily be something physical that you can point to, but at least it's an abstract thing, and we get to use our mental capacity, which obviously varies, and we get to make something cool, which to me is fantastic. It means I didn't make such a shitty decision so many years ago. So there was an oatmeal cartoon which kind of illustrates something which I'm going to get to. So you guys just have a quick look. I've got kind of frame for each slide. You'll notice the to-do list in the background. A bit sad. The good old equity, yes. Share offers and that sort of thing. But the reality is never really how it pans out. So I don't know how many of you work in a corporate world. I'm not going to ask you to put up your hand because this will probably hit home a little bit too hard. So you know what these guys are saying. If you listen really closely, they're saying, kill me. That's what they're saying. It is. It's what they're saying. Because they work for presumably like a cube farm. It must be terrible. It really must be terrible to work in a company where you're kind of just a number. And thankfully, Renee left a couple of Office Space images for me to use. And often you're going to work for someone who's not a great person. Let's put it that way. There were enough expletives used yesterday, so I'm going to kind of hold back on that one. And Bill's actually on Twitter, which is quite cool. Innertech_Bill. If you kind of follow him, then he'll tweet you back and say, got a case of the Mondays, that kind of thing. Because offices in general are not that great. I mean, who loves working in an office? Fantastic. Yeah. White person's lying on the back. Okay, cool. And then you obviously got the other side of the coin in an office that you got people that don't actually do their work, and they just like stuff around and misuse the printer. You can see that Post-its are not just for Scrum boards, they're also for messing around with things. But to me, there's actually a big problem. There's a big problem in our industry, I think, and that is that so many people just really don't care about what they do. It's a 9-to-5 job or an 8-to-5 job or whatever it is, and they really don't put any effort into learning and improving what they know. And it's something I just don't understand. Often in life you kind of have these issues and you kind of understand it and then it's not an issue anymore. For me, this is still an issue because I just don't understand how someone can work in an industry and and not be kind of playing with stuff and learning stuff and coming to conferences and that kind of thing. I don't really see it. And there's user groups. I mean, conferences cost money, as Mark and I know. But yeah, there's user groups that don't cost anything, and you can kind of go at night and learn something. So it's weird. And over the last couple of years, I've interviewed a fair number of people for a couple of customers, and I wondered what that noise was, and then it was actually related to me scratching myself. All right. And it's actually really concerning because, and this is maybe more on the Microsoft side, and again, it might not be applicable to you guys, but I'm sure it is to some extent. The 99 percentile is quite shit. It really is. And I've interviewed guys that come in, they want to come in at a senior position, and they don't know what's going on. They don't really know, like, JavaScript. They think, well, yeah, it's for validation, isn't it? Okay. I mean, it is, but that's not really the answer. And people that don't read books, and you ask them kind of, what do you learn on your own time? And I don't know if they have like a stroke or something when you say that, because they look at you really weird. And it's like, well, why would I learn on my own time? The company must pay for it. Okay. And the last interview I did for this particular customer ended up with a bit of a complaint from HR because, no, not for that reason, because the guy said, well, if I knew that I had to impress Simon, I would have done it, but I didn't know I had to. Oh, well. And I appreciate that we don't, again, just to kind of reiterate, we don't all get the chance to kind of use fantastic stuff in our daily lives, in our office lives, but there's no excuse for not kind of playing around and doing something in your own time. And if you can't use Rails from 8 to 5, that's fine, but what about spending kind of half an hour every evening to put something else together? So even if you can't do it, you can still do it to some extent. And to me, it's all about sharpening that blade. It's all about getting better and improving, because we all have to, because there's always new stuff, and because we can always improve what we know. So it's always about doing something to help us get better. And there's that theory of 10,000 hours. So if you want to be really good at something, you've got to do it for 10,000 hours. So the more work we put in, the kind of quicker we can get through that, particularly with new stuff coming up the whole time. We've got to kind of redo that 10,000 hours, it seems. So there's a lot of reasons why people don't do pet projects or do small things on their own time to improve their knowledge. The main one, or the main reason that they use is time. So there's no time. I think the real reason is because they just don't really care. That's my opinion. So there's a whole bunch of other reasons. And honestly, if time is an issue, then just don't watch MasterChef. I mean, it's as simple as that. Because we're not talking about, I'm not suggesting that somebody leads a double life and they go home and they work another 8 hours. I mean, that's not sustainable. And I'm all about quality of life, and I'm all about having fun, and we've all got kind of families and all that sort of thing. I always kind of look around and think the average age of programmers is going up, but then I realize it actually just relates to me kind of getting older. So it's kind of strange. Whoa, all the programmers now have got kids and they didn't before, and then it kind of hits home. So it's not about spending 10 hours a night. It's about choosing what you want to do and just kind of chipping away at that and building something cool. And whether it leads into a product, like we heard about yesterday, or just leads into some kind of cool project that does something cool, even if it's transient and you don't necessarily have it live for a long time, but at least you can kind of show someone and say, if you want to know if I'm passionate about what I do, there's an example. As opposed to, oh yeah, I'm very passionate, yeah. Because that's very easy to say. So the definition of free, for me, is very important. I don't do any free work at all, which might sound a bit weird, but sort of elitist. But I often don't charge people for the work as well, which I don't think is a contradiction. Sometimes you do work and you get money, which is cool. Sometimes you do work and you should get money and they don't pay you, but that's another issue. But I'm always going to get something for what I do. And sometimes it's just knowledge. So I'm going to do a project because I'm going to play with something and I'm going to learn, and I'm going to use MongoDB, or I'm going to learn whatever I'm going to learn. Other times, you can always get away with some kind of exchange of services. I did a project for someone which was basically a pet project for them. In exchange for that, they did swimming coaching for me for the year, which is cool. So it's not about always trying to invoice someone, because that's not what it's about, I don't think, particularly when it comes to pet projects. It's about, again, doing something cool and you know, being able to show someone what you've done. That to me is so important. Often we do stuff that's internal, that's very difficult to pull out and show to someone. It's maybe a little bit abstract or a little bit too business focused, something like that. So why bother having a pet project? Well, again, and I'm going to repeat it, it's about that demonstration of passion. Both for yourself, to kind of acknowledge what you've learned and prove to yourself that we've all made the right decision. But it's also about, you know, being able to sit next to somebody at a conference and being able to show them something, whether it's a URL or it's a, you know, whatever you've done, just to kind of say, hey, this is cool. This is what I've done. Obviously, it's always good to have stuff that builds up the CV. I mean, that's also important. But it's cool to be able to point to something and say, I did that. And also, the very top one is about that creative outlet. So there's nothing more frustrating than maybe having a project that doesn't quite align with your ideals of your career or your ideals of what you want to do. So you can kind of do that, but you can also get that creative outlet by doing something in your own time. So time management's a big thing. This is obviously a very general topic, but specifically to pet projects, you obviously don't want to waste your own time. So you want to make sure that whatever you do is as efficiently done as possible, which I think is a very good idea that we can kind of incorporate into our daily work as well. If it's your own time and that time is limited, you tend not to stuff around. You tend to kind of get stuff done very quickly, which I think is a really good practice to incorporate from 8 to 5. Does anyone actually work 8 to 5? Yeah. So the other big thing, obviously outsourcing the boring bits is important. You don't want to have to sit and do kind of web design if it doesn't feel good for you. Although with Twitter Bootstrap, we're all kind of web designers now, aren't we? I mean, it's fantastic. But again, you can outsource those boring bits. And a big motivator for me about pet projects or about products in general is about having users. If you have someone that's actually using your product or your little project that you've done, it is incredibly motivating. There's nothing worse than building something and realizing it's kind of completely useless to society. So I was going to show a picture of Ashton Kutcher after I said that, but I thought I wouldn't do that. Confuses the admins at my client with those proxy logs. They get too many kind of weird contradictions. All right, so again, it's just about improving, and those TPS reports again. It's about concentrating on the most important things. So a couple of ideas. I'm obviously not going to talk to you specifically about ideas for what you're going to do, because it's kind of what you want to do. But there's so many different things that we can do, and sometimes you look at an industry and think, well, other people have done it, so I'm not going to bother. But to me, if you're thinking about doing a project that fits into an industry where there are no competitors, that's a major problem. It means other people have thought about it and they've backed off for a good reason. So just kind of bear that in mind. If you're kind of the first to market with something, you're either incredibly innovative or you're incredibly stupid. It's kind of one of the two. All right. And obviously, if you're going to play on GitHub and you're going to start, forking projects and that kind of thing, just kind of bear in mind what Aaron said yesterday about the licenses. So how do you know whether someone has an MBA? They tell you. So, and the same is kind of true about Fred. Does someone actually have an MBA? Did I speak to you yesterday and you told me? I'm sorry. So it's all about marketing what you do. And you don't have to have huge press releases. We're talking about pet projects as opposed to an actual project or product that Garen spoke about. But it's about finding ways to create some kind of viral engagement around what you've done. And I think anything that you do should get some kind of just publicity. Otherwise, if you're just doing it just to kind of learn something, that's not really a pet project. You're kind of just doing it behind the scenes, and you've opened up an IDE and you've kind of hacked around. But if you're actually going to put effort into it, you may as well get the just reward for it. So there's a whole bunch of ways of doing it. And obviously what you can do is just kind of keep your notebook open on some cool thing that you've done and just kind of hope that other people are going to look at it and say, hey, what do you do? What's that? So the idea of natural selection, sometimes you're going to put a lot of effort into something and it's not going to work out. And that's a big problem. And often you've got to kind of push through. There's kind of dark days or dark months or dark years or whatever it turns out to be, depending on what you're doing. But you've also got to kind of know when to back off. And there's a book called The Dip, which talks about that, which is weird. It's kind of a book about giving up. But it kind of talks about when to give up. You know, when is a good reason to push and to continue, and when is a good reason to kind of back off. Just something we never kind of learn when you're growing up. Kind of when is it good to actually give up on certain things. And this idea of natural selection of projects is sometimes maybe it's just not a good time for what you've done, for whatever reason. So some people are really lucky with their pet projects. What this guy did on about a month ago, and it wasn't really a pet project, but I guess in some respects it was, because I've got a slide and it's my talk, so let's kind of go with it. Instead of sending out a CV, he put a page together that looked just like Amazon, and kind of worked the same as an Amazon product, except it was him as the product. It's really cool. And for some reason, he got on the homepage of CNN. I mean, how's that for publicity? That's pretty cool. I don't know if he actually got a job, or he might have got sued by Jeff Bezos. I don't know, so somewhere in between. Either way, it'll be pretty good publicity. So if you're going to try and make it work in a big company or in a corporate or a proper company as opposed to a startup, there's quite a few things you need to worry about. One of them is HR. But there are a few ways of doing it. The one is you can have a list of possible kind of pre-approved pet projects. Because if you're going to work in someone else's company, you've got to understand that there's certain boundaries, which I tend to know about fairly quickly. So you could potentially have a list of like approved pet projects that people can take on. You don't want to assign something to someone if they don't really want to do it because they're not going to bother, particularly if you're expecting them to put in extra time or kind of free time to do that. But again, maybe having a list of pre-approved ones. There's different ways of doing a rotation policy. You can use, based on the letter of the person's first name, would govern which day of the month they spend a bit of time on, so you don't have everyone kind of spending a Thursday afternoon on their pet project. You can kind of randomize it a bit. We all want to have recognition for what we do, and it's a Seth Godin thing about tribes and belonging to tribes. And for those of you that haven't read any Seth Godin, it's really good. Because we want to get recognition. We want to belong to a group that we can relate to, and we want recognition from that group, which is all what pet projects are about. It's about doing something cool and getting a thumbs up from someone. Scott Hanselman, which is a Microsoft guy, talks a lot about this thanks a bunch cabinet. So when someone does something really cool, you can kind of take something off this cabinet of stuff and kind of give it to them. So you could potentially do that from a pet project's point of view. If they do a good job, you can kind of give them a memory stick or whatever it is. This idea of M&M sessions comes from medicine or Grey's Anatomy. So it's all about, when something happens, you've got to kind of sit in front of your peers and explain it, both from a good and bad point of view. Obviously with medicine, it's typically bad. But that's a good thing. If I do a pet project within a company, I want to be able to sit in front of my peers and show them the cool thing. It obviously works both ways, that if you don't do a good job, there's going to be issues, which I think is a good thing in a big company or a proper company. Gamification, you can obviously apply as well. You just need to be careful you don't make it too competitive, because then people tend to do it for other reasons and not that intrinsic motivational reason. So I've had a theory for a while. I had a blog post from about 2000 when I mentioned this. Also the same blog post I mentioned about what a cool idea it would be to do pretty much what LinkedIn did about 5 years later. I'm such a doer. I should have done that. So the idea with hamster projects, and it works both within a company as well as with pet projects. And this is hypothetical in case anyone's going to start tweeting the SPCA about this. Whenever you start a new project, you buy a hamster. And when the hamster dies, you change project. It's kind of a natural way of giving yourself like a time bucket that you can play with the project. I had quite a few complaints the other day when I spoke about that. And I don't care if your hamster lived to 5, it doesn't happen. They tend to die at about 2. There's a reason, because they're useless things. So the kind of 2-year mark, I think, is a good idea for projects, both within a company as well as pet projects as well. So I'm going to show you a couple of things that I've done, just to kind of show you what's worked and what's failed. Some things have failed really badly. Your mileage is going to vary. So one of the things is don't give up too soon. I know I've talked about the dip, about giving up, and about the whole hamster projects thing. So I still stand by that. But sometimes things, you just got to push a little bit more. And when things don't feel like they're taking for some reason, it's a good time to kind of push a couple more times and then kind of see what's going on. So for the Americans in the room, and there's several, a duos is a cross between a honey badger and a unicorn, somewhere in between. I don't know what's happening with honey badgers. I don't know what's going on, but there's like so many things going on with honey badgers. We don't even get a honey badger here. What the hell? I don't think. So you've got to think about the customer first. Even if it's just a pet project, if you're going to release it, you've got to think about the customer. Think about what the customer actually wants. And making T-shirts, which is what this one was about, past tense, that say, I wasn't baptized, don't appeal to everyone. They really don't. I thought it would. I thought it fits my sense of humor. But you really get strange looks. You really do. I've got a bunch of the shirts here. If someone actually wants, I'll give them to you. Because my wife is really pissed off that I still have them. Both because they take up space and because of that kind of aura they give out as well. So seriously, I'll sit at the back. I've got shirts. I'll give them to you. I don't care. Just, I can take them. I don't mind. But the other thing here as well is take small leaps. Don't jump in and get 200 shirts made. Just take small leaps and kind of test the waters. It ruins marriages. It really does. It's not cool. It's not cool. So this is my baby. This is one of my babies. I have a daughter as well, but virtually this is also one of my babies. So if you're going to make something, do it in such a way that you allow people to contribute. You don't have to make it into a big company. You really don't have to do that. But do it in a way that you enable other people to contribute. Because the surprising thing, and it really took me by surprise, is that people want to help you out. They want to do something. They want to be part of that tribe that you're creating. And if you're in a fortunate position to actually create a tribe, people want to latch on, which is great. I think it's fantastic. And you've got to structure things in such a way that you enable that. You enable people to say, you know, I've got a weekend, can I help you with something? And you can say, well, there we go. And Trello is fantastic. There's obviously a whole bunch of different ones that you can use. So if you've got predefined tasks, you can say, here's 2 hours worth of work. Thank you very much. That's a good position to be in. Obviously, hosting stuff on GitHub or wherever you want to host it helps a whole lot. So you don't have to start copying code around and all that sort of thing. That's stupid. Forget about the legal talk we had yesterday. Don't use non-proprietary code, or don't use proprietary code. Don't use code that you shouldn't be using because it's a pet project and you didn't think anything would actually happen. And also asking for help before you need it is really important. We all need help, some more than others. But often, you know, you get into a bit of a rut, or you don't have enough time, and you kind of need people to help you. It's like the sort of 10 people that have asked me when this year's conference is going to happen. That's not helping. But it's good to ask for help before you need it. It really is. Because again, people want to contribute and they want to be part of something cool that you're creating. It's just one of those amazing things about human beings. And also, just the last one on that, don't listen to everyone. I'm not saying don't listen to anyone, but people give you advice, and they don't necessarily come from a place that actually they don't necessarily know what they're talking about for the most part. So you just got to be careful. I had a lot of people that said to me, don't do that. That's a stupid idea. And it's a stupid idea, but I still did it. So if I listen to everyone, if we all listen to everyone, I mean, we'd all be working for a bank or something. So, and I apologize for those that I have met that work for a bank. I'm not targeting you. I plan everything I say. It's just how it is. So I've got a bunch of links. You can all see that. I'll zoom in. I'm not going to zoom in because I've actually got a URL that you can download this. So there's a whole bunch of links that cover a lot of the stuff that I've spoken about, but also some books that I found really useful. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. You all can read. Even though you're kind of Ruby programmers, I'm sure you can read. There's a really good course on Coursera. Has anyone actually done a course, actually finished the course on Coursera? You put your hand up, you put your hand down. There's a really good one on gamification, which is quite cool. The lecture is also really good, as opposed to like some of them that I've started, and then it's like a 300-year-old guy, and it's like Gandalf, and you can't really understand. Or they're foreign, and by foreign I mean not from South Africa. But there's a bunch of stuff. There's also it's very opinionated, but it's actually a really nice blog post. There's a guy whose blog post was, if you don't have pet projects, I don't think I want you. Again, maybe kind of the extreme side of it, but you can think about it. If you're interviewing 100 people for a position, you've got to make very, very quick judgment calls. And reading through CV after CV, I mean, we all lie on our CVs. I mean, come on. So it's unbelievable. And we all know that we all, kind of, well, not lie, because it's been recorded, but like fabricate little things, So yeah, I'll speak to Mark. We can maybe cut out that last couple of minutes. But if you can prove that you've actually done something and you can point to a URL or something like that, then it's, you're taking away that risk factor. Someone knows what you can do, which I think is great. Okay, like I said, the next one's got a URL, so you guys can read through that. Just one more thing, which helped me a huge amount, and it, again, maybe more on the product development side as opposed to pet projects, but they're all kind of very similar. There was a 2007 MySQL conference keynote by Guy Kawasaki. Does anyone actually listen to that? It's phenomenal. It really is phenomenal. It's a bit ironic now because MySQL's kind of changed. But if you forget about it and just kind of put yourself back 6 years and listen to his keynote, it's fantastic. It's very little about MySQL. It's all about products and making stuff what he calls dicey. So you guys can listen to that. Cool. So that's me. And that's my dog, Bad Lassie, who's also on Twitter. The poster dog of JSNSA, which we'll bring this year. So you guys can download the presentation. I'm sure I'll give it to Mark anyway, but just so you can kind of hit it up whenever you want. So are there any questions? Shoot.
What is the URL for your slide?
For the MySQL one.
That was...
That's on the slide. So it's a whole thing. It kind of forces you to download a 3 meg PDF. I scale for no one. That's about 2.5 megs on its own. I'm not a graphics guy. What the hell? Just like make it smaller, and I'm sure it makes the image smaller. I'm sure. Don't know if it does. Okay. Any other questions? Have any of you put a cool pet project together? You want to kind of mention? It's a nice bit of publicity. Shoot. Okay, cool. Yeah, Jonathan. ScaleCon. We must talk about the tripartite alliance. We must talk about that. All right. Yeah. There's a whole lot of questions. It's unbelievable. I thought like no one would do it. And, oh shit! And wait for Mark to do it, just like a token question. Yes. It's the best conference in the country. It is. No, that wasn't the answer. I was just kidding, just looking at Mark. I was just kidding. It's the JavaScript conference. We did one in 2011, 2012, and yes, Aslam, we'll do one this year. Where? It will be in Johannesburg. Oh. Bloom. It's 1 day. We just open up Dynamic Drive and I show you how to copy and paste and that sort of thing. I did that once in a training session. I copied something and then I pasted it. And this one guy who I was training kind of looked really weird. And he said, well, he did Control V and that didn't come out of his clipboard. I wasn't sure whether it's just like a really dark sense of humor, but it wasn't. It's unbelievable. Anyway, yeah.
I just want to ask about fine-free Wi-Fi. I think I mentioned before, is it a Mac finishing-based fine-free Wi-Fi?
So thanks to a whole lot of people that contributed, we've got apps for Android and Windows Phone, Windows Phone, God, and iOS, and there's a Mobi site, and the main site will have a map. So if you hit it with the actual browser,
I just wanted to find out if you use, what mapping data do you use for those?
it depends if I'm allowed to. If I'm allowed to use Google Maps, then we use Google Maps. Otherwise, Mark will have to just edit that part out. I think I'm allowed to. It's free, so it's free. I'm sure it's fine. They follow me on Twitter, so I haven't received any DMCA notices or DMCA notices. Thank you. Thank you. Cool. Cool. Thank you very much. Thank you.